Okay everybody, so let's get going with this new Vectorworks tutorial on the new amazing 3D dragger that Vectorworks introduced with the new 2024 version. Now here we are in the 2024 version of Vectorworks. You can see I've got this lovely dark new interface. I'm going to do another video on this very shortly, so if you are new around here, make sure you do subscribe and you'll get that too. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically pop up into our settings, and you'll notice down at the bottom here, so I'm going to start down here with the snap settings. Now, if you don't see the snap settings down here, you're going to need to go up to the view bar settings and basically turn off the snapping icon here. So instead of the snapping featuring in the view bar itself, it actually lives down at the bottom where it used to. So I much prefer it down there. While you're here, I'd also recommend turning off the text. Although it is a nice new feature to have the text there, kind of don't really need it here because you've got it in the menus and you've also got it elsewhere in the object info. And you'll notice that all of this gets a little bit more compressed in my view. So personally, I would actually turn off the text as well. Okay, so a couple of little tips for you there on the interface on 2024. So I'm going to go down to my snaps, click and hold. Now you notice that not only can I turn on the grid here, I can also show the 3D axis. And if I do enable the 3D axis labels, I actually get those labeled up as well. Now they can be a bit distracting, but I think when you're first working in 3D, these can help. So when I go to top plan, of course the 3D axes disappear, but the grid remains. And this works both in dark mode and light mode, and it's quite easy to visualize in dark mode for sure. Now if you do want to turn the grid off, you can also do it from the button up on the top on the mode bar. Just make sure that you've enabled that as one of the settings, and of course you can always click it on here as well. Okay, so let's get into the 3D dragger. Now before I do anything, I'm going to double click number 4, which is my shortcut for the rectangle tool. I'm just going to drop in a 5 meter by 5 meter cube or kind of rectangle at the center here. Now at the moment this shape is not a 3D shape, so if I click onto the reshape tool with the minus key for shortcut there, you'll notice that it only reshapes two-dimensionally. Okay, so there's our 2D reshape tool. There's no 3D capability. So in order to have 3D dragging capability, we do need to convert this into something that is three-dimensional. Now we could use the convert menu and go to 3D polygons, 3D NURBS, and a variety of other things. But I'm actually going to go up to the model menu and use the well underused but very, very useful 3D Power Pack. And basically I'm going to do something called create surface from curves. Now what this does, which is actually pretty nice, is immediately converts it into a NURBS curve. Now you can see it's a NURBS surface. In fact, I can change the degree weighting. So if I want to, I can put in more vertices, and you'll notice that I can now sort of see these extra points coming in. Now what's really nice is, whoops, let's just put 3 in there. If I double click now on the axis and click on a point, you'll notice I get the 3D dragger popping up immediately. So let's kind of decode this for you a little bit more. Basically what you've got here is a really nice sort of directional axis. So if you hover over all of these, they change color to respond. So you see I'm on the Z axis here. You'll notice that when you do click, they all grey out. The other ones actually grey out, which is actually really nice. So as ever, we can type in a distance very accurately in Vectorworks to move that particular point up 1 meter. So let's do the same on this corner here. Click onto the Z axis, click to start moving, and let's type 1 meter. So basically already, if I put this in front view, you can see I've created quite a complex sort of folded surface just from a rectangle. But basically we've moved up those vertices. Let's double click and do the same with these two. If I hold shift down, I can select both, and you'll notice that this one still stays highlighted. So basically now I can take those, boom, 1 meter, and create like a folded surface, up rather. So here I've moved them up again to create this sort of shell-like surface. And you'll notice if I click into the middle, I could select a vertex or 2 or 3 or even 4 at the same time. And let's just click and move those up a little bit. Let's move those up, say 1 meter, and see how this looks. So now I've got this kind of really nice, interesting surface, which is raising a bit in the middle and curving at the edges. So this might make something like a really nice roof. So just one more command that I'm just going to pile on top is go to my 3D tools. And I love the 3D shell tool because this enables me to basically make a solid form out of that. And you can see I've made a really quite a complicated form in a very, very small amount of time, starting with a rectangle and then using the 3D dragger. Now what's really cool about the 3D dragger is if we double click into the history of the shape, you'll notice I'm back to the NURBS surface. So now I can click on my vertex. I can do all other sorts of manipulation as well. Let's go -1 meter. Okay, let's move that point there. Let's take this one. Let's move this out, say 1 meter. Let's do 1M. Okay, and let's just click exit shell and revert. So now you can see I've moved this point, I've moved this point, and basically that's enabled me to create this really complicated type of roof. Let's just do that one more time. So I'm going to double click, I'm going to select this vertex here, for example, and really kind of move it up, let's say 2 meters this time. So that's basically going to really influence the shape of the curve and make a much sort of mounded aspect to this roof here. When I click shell, it reshells the shape and I've created this wonderful shape. Now this is basically a combination of Vectorworks using the design history and also the ability to basically do things like solid subtractions and additions. So basically if I do want to say cut a hole in there, I can select both of those items. Let's do a solid subtraction. So that will create a hole. But the really nice thing is I can now double click back into the history multiple times, go right back in. Let's select this vertex and this vertex. Let's raise that up even more and see what happens. So when I exit the shell, I may need to just readjust the position of this, or at least the size of this. I'm ready. Let's click OK. So here we go. We've created a really quite complicated little roof here. Just to finish off this little example of this roof, I'm going to go onto my texture tool and basically going to go into my textures and select some really nice sort of facade. I've got some here, look, and I can basically just paint that straight on that surface. Let's revolve underneath, and this time I want something a bit more kind of timber for the internal. So I'm going to go to my texture pack that I've developed over here. Now you can find my texture packs on my website if you're interested, and there's some really nice materials here. And let's go for, I think we'll just go for this sort of black timber. It looks really cool, and click and apply that. Now you can see that's worked really, really well. If you do want to scale these textures, by the way, remember to just go to the render tab, scroll down a little bit and select the face override. There we go. And basically now I can scale and I can even rotate if I do want to onto the triangular axis. Let's do 45 degrees. So this is a really nice little technique. I basically can also paint those surfaces of the side aspect there. We'll just paint that surface there and spin it around and paint that and paint that. So what do you think? I've made something pretty complicated. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's quite an organic form in a very short space of time using the new 3D dragger. So now let's look at something else really cool with the 3D dragger that I only just discovered and I'm super impressed. Let's demonstrate the next element of the 3D dragger that's really, really interesting. So I'm going to go into this layer. I'm just going to rename this one the roof layer. And basically I'm going to double click number 4 and regenerate a slightly smaller 4 meter by 4 meter shape in the middle of my screen, once again by snapping in there. This time I'm going to extrude this 4 meters. Okay, and that will enable me to look in the front view, and I just want to move this element up a little bit into that zone there, just so you can see I've got something to snap to. So what I'm going to do is select my cube and I'm basically going to make another layer. I could do it with a class as well, but let's just call this base. Okay, so we're ready to go, and basically I'm going to turn off my roof layer just for a second and turn the base on. So here I've got this cube, and what I'm going to use is the NURBS curve tool to plot on the surface of the model. Okay, so we've got our cube in the middle. I'm going to go to the NURBS curve, and basically up in the options I'm going to click on here and I'm going to accept the normal default degree weighting of 3. By the way, if you do make the degree weighting 1, you'll get a polygon as opposed to a curve, but I'm pretty happy with the curve. I'm going to click, find the center point up here on this face and then down to the bottom, and you'll see that I've actually generated a really nice NURBS curve on this surface. Okay, so now what we can do is basically click and draw a shape that I want to extrude around this curve, let's say 200 mil for a little circle, and basically select both items And I can do a really nice command in 3D called extrude along a path. So I've got my path selected. Let's click OK, and you can see now I've extruded this curve along the NURBS curve. So that's really, really cool. But basically, if I double click, I can edit the path or the profile. And traditionally, when you edited the path, you could really only do this in 2D. But now, of course, I can get into my 3D dragger, click, and modify that path in some way. If I want to, I can also click onto the 3D dragger and modify it directly and dynamically in the model, which is pretty cool without having to go in. So in order to do this, I'm going to click onto this second mode, the transform. I'm going to select the vertex, and now you can see that I can move this in any direction. Now, here's a good one. If you click onto this one, it will align with the working plane. So it means that I can basically move this curve up and down as required. And I can even, if I want to, take it here and maybe bring it in a bit or take it out a bit more. I can do all sorts of things. You'll notice that I've even got a plus mode where I can even add additional vertices to generate even something a bit more complicated as well. So if I did want to, maybe I could lock my Z-axis, click here and generate an additional point just to make that curve even more complex. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. So let's turn the base roof on. Let's turn the cube off for a minute. So we'll just cut that away and we'll put the mode into these other modes. So I've got this element here, which I'm quite keen. And basically I can click onto my mirror tool and mirror this around the middle. So let's use my M for mirror on my particular workspace, just to create a couple of kind of guides for our weird and wonderful little structure here. As I say, if this one is a little bit too tight, I can just click on my 3D dragger, click on the vertex, and let's just go back to the move vertex mode, click here, and just sort of bring that one down a little bit, just so it's kind of just touching underneath as opposed to popping through the model. Now, this is pretty cool. So I want to also show you how extruding along a path can do something pretty amazing in plan. So for this one, I'm going to go over to top plan and basically going to click 6 and draw a circle. And what I'm going to do is extrude along this path using maybe a polygon, so a rectangular polygon. And with this tool, I really love this. I can go in to put the number of sides. Let's go back to top plan. Basically click and let's draw a perimeter value here. A little octagon, a little octagon of 700 mil. And basically let's select my shape and we'll do, once again, extruding along a path. So model, extrude along a path, and we'll click OK. Model, extrude along a path. We'll make sure the path is highlighted. We'll click OK, and you'll see that I've got this nice element here. Okay, so if I select and click the reshape tool, we'll get my 3D dragger vertices popping up. Let's click on this vertex and we'll move it halfway, and you'll notice that if I wanted to snap, it's not actually snapping. So this time, basically, let's click on this little yellow dot and you'll notice now it actually snaps. So as well as that, I can click on the arrow, which is just freeform moving. Let's just freeform move. I can also click on the little vertex and basically snap up onto that axis to any other point. So that's pretty cool in that I've been able to three-dimensionally reshape this, what started as a circle, into a spiral. And as well as this, let's just pop out of a 3D view. I really like the way that I can basically double click, as well as editing the path, I can also edit that profile. So if I did decide I wanted to change that into a circle, for example, I could just delete the old profile and then back out, and I've now got a circle in there. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now let's also get my reshape tool, and I want to show you that if I click on the plus mode, I can basically add in additional vertices as well. So these can be quite hard to control, but just be careful where the direction you're moving them. So you might want to lock various axes. So I'm going to turn the x-axis on. So now when I click my plus, you'll notice that it locks onto that and it generates in the x direction. If I go onto the y direction now, when I click plus, it starts to turn upwards. And if I go to the y direction, sorry, that was the z direction. If I go to the y direction, you'll notice that I can start moving in this direction as well. So I really like the way you can actually add vertices. You can obviously subtract them again, and it kind of reverts back. Okay, so let's just add a bit of detail with a couple of textures on here. Once again, using my texture tool, going to go through and basically select some nice wooden materials. Let's go for a zinc material on those. See how that looks. That looks pretty cool. And let's go for another material on these as well. Perforated metal. That'll be interesting as well. Okay, look, I'm really just making a funny little pavilion just to show you this sort of freeform modeling capability. And it's really, really cool. The 3D dragger, the ability just to be able to kind of quickly dynamically reshape these elements by going into the history and double clicking directly. Now, the other place that this works pretty well is with something called subdivision. So I'm just going to make a subdiv layer here. And just for a second, let me just turn off these other elements, or rather grey them out. So that might be quite helpful. So subdivision is something else I plan to make another video on this year, so do make sure you hang around and subscribe for this one. But if I go to subdivision solid, basically I can generate all sorts of different types of subdivisions, and I'm going to demonstrate a torus for you. So basically let's click into that and click into the middle to generate a nice big torus, and let's just turn those elements on just for a moment just to see how this is looking. Okay, so what do we want to do? The first thing I want to do is basically scale this down. So I'm going to double click, and basically you'll notice that I can hold shift down, selecting all of the surfaces on the top of the model. And basically there's the 3D dragger. So we can just sort of squish that right down. You'll notice that as soon as you click escape, basically the model smooths out even more. And if you do want to, you can increase the iteration, which will make it much smoother. When you're modelling, it's quite nice to have on a lower iteration rather than a high one. But obviously, if you go to too high, look at that, there's billions of points in there. So let's keep it quite low for now. So next up, I can basically double click any of these vertices, and I wanted to click on a couple here and a couple over there. Okay, and I'm going to click onto that midpoint and just start to raise those up on the top, just to create a bit of an interest on that ring. I also wanted to create basically this one here and just sort of bring that one in. So let's just slide that one in just to show you how that works. And basically this is the same principle. You can click any of the edges. So if I want to move an edge, I can do that. If I want to move a vertical edge, I can do that too. And basically when you're ready, you can click the iteration up, out of the model, and you've just created this really, really interesting sort of form. Okay, so we're almost ready with our very, very strange form that we've created. Now don't forget that you can also do this with it fully textured up as well. So let's go and find a really nice material for this wall. I think what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to go into one of my other texture packs. This is one of the free sample ones, so you're more than welcome to download this one. Basically it's some really nice materials. Let's go for some zinc cladding and basically apply. Now you'll notice that you can't apply to the NURBS surface, or the subdivision rather. So if you do want to apply to a NURBS surface or a subdivision, you must convert it when you're ready to a solid. A generic solid will be one thing that you convert it to. It says that you can't go back, so just watch out for this. You cannot go back again. But the good thing is now I can fully sort of texture up this model, and basically you'll notice that I can do it in sections, which is actually really, really cool. So I can do a few sections with one texture. And if I do want to, let's go in and find a different material. Let's do something else here, over here. And let's just spin the model around. There we go. A few different materials there on this rather interesting form that I've created. So I really, really love the flexibility of freeform modeling. As I say, sometimes it's actually good fun not to model anything specific, but just to have a little play with the Vectorworks sort of freeform modeling. And the purpose of the video really was to show you the 3D dragger. Now obviously I can't click onto the reshape tool now and go back to my solid because this has got no history. But what I can do, if I do want to, is do things like split it. So I'll just show you this last one. I'm going to go to the split tool. And to do this, actually, I'm going to turn off the other layers because you've got to be a bit careful with the split tool, in that basically we can split and trim, and basically that will trim out those other elements so that I've got a bit of an interesting form there. So if I do want to, I can double click to get the split face. I could then move that split face. I'm not quite happy with the way it was. Let's just move it to about here and come back out and so on. Okay, everybody, well, I do hope you've had an enjoyable view into my weird and wonderful animation and imagination, rather, today. Modelling up some really weird sort of shapes using organic form modelling, but most importantly with this wonderful 3D dragger, also benefiting from things like the history-based modelling and the fact we've also touched on some of the things like the texturing tools. So as ever, thanks for watching everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.